What is your theory on the brain and how it functions?
Okay, the brain is really something that we can't see. So the word that we have on it is basically what we have been told through science, and we can't necessarily trust what they say without seeing it in action, because you can't see it in action. From what I understand, the closest you can see it in action is through the movements of the eyes, because you can see into this brain when you see the eyes and how they move, because it shows how an individual is either receiving or processing information. It's linked to this brain that they talk about. As far as being able to understand it, that's the closest I've come. Otherwise, it's this theoretical idea that there's something that's controlling you, everything about you, that can't be seen.
I wonder if that's why they say that eyes are the windows to the soul. Is your mind, or people's minds, controlled by the brain, or is the brain controlled by the mind?
The mind in Vedantic and spiritual literature has a much different flavor than the brain, which is a more scientific term. So to see something through your mind is to understand it through the color of your perception. To have the brain involved would be to say that you're perceiving because of this invisible object that is between your ears, which some people call tofu, or any metaphor that you want to use. But you can't see it. If you do an experiment and see how you can't see your brain, there's a question of how it's controlling you or you're controlled by it. It's really not something that has any hard data past what someone says is true. So the doctrine of science is to trust these people who say that it's true. And if you were to do an experiment, like take someone's brain out of their head and see if they could function, it would be very unethical. And anything else is extrapolation. I just have a little bit of a it would be impossible to determine what's causing any movement in consciousness.
They say that our brain is a computer. Are you a computer?
If they say it's a computer, then you can tell a lot by their tonality and inflection what's going on. I am a computer would mean that everything that I see, think, and perceive comes from a place that I have not consciously knowledge to. So everything that I've, even coming out of my mouth, is something that I've extrapolated from input received in the past. So a computer functions in a way that I don't know because I'm not a programmer. I understand that for someone to be able to have a computer and program it, they would have to understand how they would have to think like a computer to make it able to access the same knowledge and data that they had programmed into it. So if you think like a computer, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a computer.
Well, speaking of programs, what programs are you running?
I guess I have a program in my head like Facebook. I deleted it once because it was taking over me. I felt like I was unable to differentiate reality from Facebook. I had all these negative things that I was doing on there. I was trying to control people, lead their thinking, have images that would bring their brains into a certain order of thought. It was really something that consumed me. So just like any negative thing that you're involved in, it essentially affects the one who's doing it. So I deleted, which is why a lot of my Facebook entries are deleted. I realized I was running a program within myself of Facebook. I had become my Facebook. So I stopped doing that, and now I only post things that I believe, I understand. In that way, I've been able to free my mind to more interesting thought that I am aware of and that I can lead logically and also emotionally and spiritually. I'm trying to get in touch with things that aren't necessarily verified by the senses.
Your senses, your brain, your body, all of those are yourself. How do you control yourself?
when someone says something that's a trigger for you, it takes you into that place where you go into a mode where you're trying to respond. How do I control myself? I take input from the outside, and sometimes I go into a trance where I'm only able to take input from the outside. If I go to a party, for an example, there are a lot of people doing things that I don't understand. I'm like a blank book. I walk in there and I feel dazed, and I see that there's no stimulus that I'm understanding, in terms of there's no obvious way for my thoughts to go. So I just notice and observe what's happening, and in this blank slate mode, what's going on around me is like, it can be understood, my inner state, through my words and my inflections, but I know that what's going on around me is sort of like a question in terms of what am I receiving as input and how am I going to put it back out later to form a logical thought pattern that makes sense. That's the best I can answer it.
Tell me, what's the answer to positive change in social groups, society, and government, and what is the state of America?
It's a mind control state, if you believe it. Well, it's founded on the Constitution, and the United States of America really means states that are hypnotic and united. So when we interact with another person, we'll be able to relate to them because we're in the same place. If we were talking to someone from Brazil or Bangladesh or some random place, we might not be able to understand them, not just because they don't speak the same language, but because they're from a place that doesn't subscribe to the same customs, symbols, and rules that we're used to in our social order. Speaking of which, there are things going on that come out subliminally through just talking to someone who has a lot of knowledge that are influencing other great deals of people through certain beliefs that are instilled in tonality and, I guess, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, that isn't understood by the main populace. So when you do something or think something, they don't understand how little conscious awareness they have, which advertisers prey on. So it is a media brainwashed society that has a certain amount of beliefs installed in them. But that itself is a program that's being seen and is running through this mouth, which is speaking these words that were thought and picked up from information that was studied in the past. So it's all seen as like this large, I mean, I guess you could call it collective delusion, or maybe it's a game, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a small group of people pulling the strings and playing it really like an instrument so that they could know just which way to tune the notes to make the people, populace, however you associate that, is a pretty powerful word, with one particular perception or not another.
Well, given all that, how would you say it would be possible to affect positive change in social groups, society, and the government?
You have to be able to understand yourself and be in the moment enough to understand the other people and what they're saying, because they're always speaking to you. So understanding their cues takes you out of yourself, and when you're not in the picture, you can see what's really going on and speak to a group in a way that's hypnotic, because you're able to understand what is being said through the nonverbal body language, because people speak through their movements, not their words. Affecting positive change would mean to be a viable politician or legislature, or someone who can control vast numbers of perceptions, because the perceptions form the reality, the collective reality. So forming the collective reality into a better collective reality can be a scary thought, because it leads up to ideas of Hitler or totalitarianism, which people have tried these things and failed. And so you have to be very humble to be able to actually serve populace in a way that's better for not just someone who's under mind control or a slave, or someone who has certain ideas in their head, but also someone who are a vast array of people, like law enforcement, people who are very programmed to a tight-knit way of seeing the world, not be afraid of them, and understanding that they do speak the same language, if you can get over barriers of miscommunication and speak that language.
Well said, and
thank you.
That probably concludes this interview.
Okay, well, thanks for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity to disseminate information of any kind to anyone who can see.
Thank you, mutually.
Kind of thing, yeah? Okay.
Signing off.
So.